You're listening to the A to Z of Human Performance live show weekdays at 13:30 GMT with Chris Lissaman and resident expert Jonna Sercombe. Please enjoy responsibly.
Welcome to another show, everybody. I'm delighted not to be joined by Jonna Sercombe today, but to have two guests, which is very exciting for show 14. Andy McConkey, co-founder of Interactive Workshops alongside Jonna, and Paralympic Canoe Champion Emma Wiggs. Great to have you both on the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Pleasure to be here.
It's really exciting. You wait for one guest and then two come along at once. It's really typical. And we don't have just one
topic. Are you calling me a bus?
A little bit,
Thanks.
We've got two great buses. And we don't just have one topic, but three topics today. Nugatory, noise, and no are the three topics we'll be covering, which I'm excited to get stuck into. But if you're just joining us for the first time, all of the shows are on our website, interactiveworkshops.com. So you can go and find them there. They're on a YouTube channel as well. And you can subscribe so you don't miss a show. We've had Killing with Kindness this week. We've had Latency, Motivation and Mood Music we were talking about yesterday. Today we're talking about Nugatory, Noise and No. Firstly, Andy, what is something that's nugatory?
Something that is nugatory is something that all of us do every single day, probably multiple times, which is not particularly important, the inconsequential, the things that we find ourselves doing, the things we find ourselves spending our time with that aren't actually supporting our life or growth or work or business or family life. It's the inconsequential things that take up our attention and time.
Okay, so inconsequential things that don't really matter, but we find ourselves doing them. And perhaps it's just, we thought it was expected of us. I'm going to come to you, Emma. You're an athlete. You must have to eliminate these kind of things from your day-to-day routine.
Yeah, well, I'm just feeling very glad that Andy got that first question, because I would have to have looked it up, to be honest. But absolutely, yeah, I think it's probably a mixture of two, Chris. We have to do the boring, mundane things in order to allow us to perform, but we've also got to balance that with reducing as much of them as we can, and really being really clear around what will make the boat go faster in my sport, and I guess in the performance world, what could help you perform better.
Okay, yeah. So you're both eliminating them and actually relying on them in a sense. What kind of things do you find yourself doing that are just that work that you just have to kind of churn away at?
I think probably for me, it's a lot of the preparation stuff that we do. So it's your food prep, it's your warm-ups, it's being really diligent about the really mundane, boring bits that allow you to then perform in the sessions. And we train as a full squad at Nottingham, so we get to see people that maybe don't warm up and how they perform in sessions compared to maybe some of us that do. And I think for me, I take great confidence from repeating something over and over again, whether that be the boring bits or whether that be the delivery bits, because then when I get to those moments where I need to perform, I've kind of got it in the bank almost, and it kind of just becomes natural.
Yeah, and while you're talking about preparation, I've got to mention, Jonna mentioned on the show previously how your preparation isn't necessarily about even winning the race. It's actually the inputs that you're putting in. Tell us a bit more about your approach to a race.
I think it's for me. We race over less than 50 seconds, hopefully, unless it's a massive headwind. And to do that, you can't really have any time to think about it. So the preparation we do is all done in the training. So we have a phrase where we say train hard, race easy. So the actual delivery of the race in that moment should almost feel like automatic and feel like flow. And I feel that my best chance of doing that is if I've done the prep work and got that routine. So everything I do is about process. How do I want to feel an hour before the start, half an hour before the start, in my warm-up, 3 minutes into my warm-up? How do I want to feel on the start line? Because getting all of those things ticked off, I then know that when the start bucket drops, I'm in the right place to deliver automatically. So I think for me, it is that process of preparation. And like Andy said, ignoring some of the stuff that I need to ignore, but also focusing on the kind of basic processes.
Yeah, so you've done all of the work you need to do to put yourself in exactly the position you want to be in when you're starting out, right before you're about to race.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then coming to you, Andy, you're obviously a co-founder of Interactive Workshops, and you've built the company on an ethos of doing things a bit differently. Have you had to eliminate some of the things that perhaps might be expected of a company like Interactive Workshops?
Good question, and I'll have to think about that. The truth about me is that I'm remarkably boring, so there's not that much to cut out of my life. But actually, when we're thinking about how to set things up, this particular topic, as it happens, I'm here filling in for John, but as it happens, this particular element of only focusing where you can really make a difference is a big thing that is one of my driving factors personally, and as well how we have grown and set up interactive workshops as well. Because in my experience partnering with loads of clients and people and friends and family, and people spend so much time having not particularly productive conversations or amounts of time thinking about the stuff that is stressing them out or occupying their mind, or that honestly they will not be able to shift. Come hell or high water, as much thinking as I do, as many conversations as I have with my manager or my team, or really we're trying to like move the mountain, where actually what we should be doing is focusing on building this wall at the bottom that we can actually do something about. Thanks very much. And so everything about my ethos and how I approach my work personally and also the business is saying, well, where can we make a difference? What can we do? Where will our attention, focus, energy actually make a shift and a difference? Let's look there. Let's focus there. And I am someone that hates procrastination and hates inefficient meetings and hates any sort of inefficiency at all, to be perfectly honest. And some would say that makes me a very cold-hearted and not particularly nice person. I would counter that. But actually, it's all about just saying, well, is this optimal? Is this the best way of doing it? Is this actually? And it's not about whether it's the sexy stuff or the not sexy stuff. As Emma was saying, a lot of your training and focus is on the mundane or feeling mundane in the moment. But it's about repetition. It's about the small things, ensuring that the details are correct. And details can be really important, but are we focusing on the right ones? And so it isn't about saying all I want to do is the sexy, cool, innovative, never done before learning experiences. A lot of it is focusing on the good fundamentals of having an amazing team of people, letting them just be brilliant, not getting in their way, and focusing on the numbers and performance of the business, having your right metrics, like all the boring stuff as well. But that is not nugatory, even though it might be small and mundane. It is building for a purpose, and it's what you can focus on and control. There is a difference between small and seemingly inconsequential, but actually building something, and then the small, medium, or big that might seem like it's the screaming fire in your face, but actually it's inconsequential. And those are the things that can really be the waste and take our attention, I think.
I think that's really interesting, Andy. Sorry, Chris. I think that's
go ahead.
The bit around control. So, and I think that's the key, isn't it? From everything that Andy just said, it is about controlling the controllables. It's, it's a cheesy phrase, but absolutely that is critical. So in my world, if I look at the weather and see a massive raging crosswind, which is just going to make my life really hard, focusing on that is completely worthless and futile, because all that's going to do is raise my anxiety levels. I'm focusing on something that I cannot control at all. What I need to be doing, if I'm looking at it from Andy's point of view, is focusing on what I can control. Okay, so in this wind, this is my plan. This is what I need to do. And that change in mindset is the difference between winning and not winning. And it's the same in life, isn't it? Why would we waste our energies on things that we can't control? And I think we're all living at the minute in a world where that has never been more true.
Yeah, I'm picking up on that theme in business and sport there, that actually focusing on what we control is really vital. And it brings us nicely onto the topic of noise as well. You mentioned that headwind. When you see conditions on race day, or you see your opponents, that noise in your head starts to build up of, oh no, look at them, or look at the weather. How do you manage that noise, Emma?
Not always very well. I'm getting better, but I was definitely particularly in the early years of my canoe racing career, very obsessed with those external things. So I would turn up to a competition internationally and I would say, oh my gosh, look how big and strong they look. Look how massive they are. They're on the side of the lake. It's got no relevance to how fast they can paddle a boat. But I would obsess about that and then turn it into, that must mean they're a fast paddler. So my brain has focused on the wrong thing and then made an outcome out of it that is completely unproven. And it's the same with the weather. It's a really hard thing to do in life and in sport to narrow that focus and to be really diligent with talking to yourself. And I found it really helpful when I did some work with one of the sports psychologists around being in a tunnel. So trying to think of myself in a tunnel, what am I going to put my focus on, and what's helpful, and developing a script. So, in those moments where I'd turn up and it would be blowing an absolute hoolie and I'd be thinking, crikey, I can't possibly, manage in these conditions. I have to ask myself, can I control this? No. Is this helpful? No. And then you straight away you have to start down a different track. And I found that a really useful process. And I think, that's applicable to life, isn't it? We can all have a word with ourselves and say, I think at the beginning of the pandemic, I was probably, along with everyone else, quite obsessed with the news. And I had to ask myself, is it really helpful that I'm listening to the news or checking the news on social media every hour of every day? Well, probably not. Can I direct my energies somewhere else? Yes. And that was a question and answer state that I put myself in, and then I made a change and I was much better for it. So I think it's very easy to carry on doing what we've always done, because it's quite nice to worry sometimes, isn't it? It's quite a human need to think, well, let's think what's the worst case scenario, what really bad could happen. Whereas actually, sometimes it's not as bad as it might seem, and actually by putting our energies into something else, it kind of just diminishes it. It's like those things I'm sure in business where, say you've got a real gripe with someone and you think, I'm going to send this email, and you write it but you put it in your draft folder and you go back to it a few hours later, and actually it's not quite as loud and as loud as it needs to be as it was before. It's just toned down because things have lessened. And I think all these sorts of things are just really good strategies to just give us time to reflect and dampen that noise down, which ultimately is not only going to help us perform better, but make us happier.
Yeah, there's some really good strategies there. The tunnel kind of thinking of just putting yourself away from the other distractions and actually just thinking, what should I be thinking in this moment? The self-talk can be really helpful as well. I'll come to you, Andy. You've got two kids. How can noise be an impact on high performance?
It can stop you performing entirely. I do think that, for me anyway, in my perspective on noise, is it comes in two quite distinct ways. And I think the strategies and what Emma was talking about is really impressive when you can have that amount of conscious mastery of being able to turn it off and tunnel it down, and all these things that, as you say, you can work on with psychologists, and some people are just innately better than others as well. But you've got this perhaps conscious noise that you can then make yourself aware of, like Emma was talking about. So historically, maybe she turned up on race day and the Dutch competitor is looking unfairly tall and large, and we have the wind that is a factor completely outside of our control, and it can give you all of these self-talk things. And if you don't bring that into your conscious frame, it can really negatively affect your performance. If you can bring it into the conscious frame, then you can start to say, yeah, that's one of my triggers. You notice it, you can then start to change your response and change your action and go down a different path of thinking, or reframe it and say, well, it's windy for everyone. If I can be better at managing this wind than my competitors, then that also gives me not a disadvantage, yet another advantage. There's all ways of potentially reframing as well. But that's the conscious noise. And so that's the stuff that might be not particularly helpful. It's our self-talk or external talk, or the words that you overhear somebody in an open plan office talking about that distracts you. And that's the stuff that can be in the conscious. But I do think there's also the unconscious stuff that we just aren't very good at being aware of. It's the worry that we've been carrying around with us for the last 3 weeks at the start of the pandemic, when we had older parents or grandparents that, you know, we were sort of not aware how much we were worrying about them. And actually that had been taking a lot of our, you know, mental energy or blood sugar on a daily basis. And then you've got the, you know, in the classic distraction of the open plan workplace when we used to do that sort of thing. And that was all the noise that was going on. And you realize 2 hours later that you've actually just been kind of, you know, overhearing conversations, and you still haven't finished that email yet, and all of that kind of inefficiency that can come in. But then we've taken away all of those distractions over the last 6-8 months. But then, of course, as Emma was saying, then you bring in the news, you bring in the multitasking, you bring in the fact that everyone's now got their Teams channel and the video call and their emails and the 2 documents they were working on and the other screen next to them and the homeschool kids shouting downstairs and all of this other noise, some of it very physical and some of it that we're just not thinking is noise. It's saying, actually, are the audible pings in my team channel helping me or not? Are the audible email alerts helping me or not? Is the fact that I've got so many tabs open helping me or not? And actually, what's the noise that is simply occupying our headspace that might be taking away the amount of mental resource we have to apply a real focus to get high performance?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It relates back to what we were talking about yesterday about motivation, actually, and about what's actually bringing us to do what we're doing, and making sure those things that might be blockers for us aren't present.
And
go on, Andy.
Sorry, I was just going to say, because for me, yes, you know, the kids are a huge distraction. I have a long-suffering wife who does an amazing job with them, but you know, they're also, I utilize it as a motivation, because I'm aware how intense it is to have 2 small children at home that you have to look after in a lockdown situation. It actually spurs me on to be as focused and productive as possible, so I can finish my day at the earliest possible minute to go down and help. And so actually there are, you know, it's not necessarily just distraction and noise, it is how you use that to channel and motivate focus and performance. Yeah,
completely. And let's move on to our third no of our N chapter. No is our third N, no. Does no always have to be negative, Andy?
No.
Thank you. Emma?
No, I think I agree. I think it's really interesting, because I feel like I've been on this kind of journey of learning about performance, even though I've been doing it for years. And actually, the more I learn, the more I change, and the more clever I become at making decisions, and particularly around saying no to things. You know, I've always been an advocate of more is better, and therefore I will do everything I'm told to do, and I'll do it more than they say, and that's got to mean I'm faster. And maybe it's because I'm getting old, but equally I'm just think I'm a bit more savvy about thinking, well, actually, no, you know, is probably more powerful than yes. So a great example is last week. We were supposed to do a session on a kind of technical aspect, so not completely essential, but an optional session. So that I was always 100% definitely going to do it. Snowstorm came, it was -5, had a conversation with my coach, and actually we decided, no, we're not going to do the session, which goes against everything that I believed. But actually that was the performance decision, because had we done that session, it would have impacted the delivery sessions the following day. So the win was actually in saying, no, we're not going to do it, and being okay with that. Now, probably a year, maybe 18 months ago, if I'd said no to a session, I would have then wasted the afternoon off worrying that I hadn't done the session. So you've got to be really clever about, you know, if you're going to say no to something, you've got to be happy and content with that to get the maximum benefit of that decision. Otherwise it's pointless, isn't it? It's fruitful to say no and then worry for the entire time that you've got at your disposal that you said no.
Yeah, are you picking up on kind of a yes is no and no is yes kind of thing there, where you've got to choose? If you're saying no to something, you're saying yes to something else.
Yeah, and I think it's quite empowering, and I think that's something that lockdown has shown me. You know, I was always a believer that I needed to be part of a team. I had to operate in part of a team. I had to train in part of a team. Partly so I could, you know, feel like I was part of something, but also so I could look at everybody else and make sure that, you know, they were, you know, how good are they? Am I as good, etc., etc. But actually going into lockdown and being forced to train at home, you know, in a bungalow, it's not ideal for canoeing. I actually found a completely new level of of training focus and intensity. And I realized, oh, I don't have to be at the training center every single day, 6 days a week. I don't have to be in a group. I actually can work really hard and with loads more focus on my own. And it felt quite empowering to say, when we were allowed to go back, to say, no, I'm going to stay at home on this day and do my sessions at home, because I know what I'm doing and I've got the focus and I've got the intent to do that. And that felt really empowering. And I don't think, if we hadn't have experienced 2020, I don't think I would have ever come to that conclusion, because I'd always been of the belief that you had to be in the center. If you weren't in the center, you weren't doing it properly, and you couldn't say no to anything. So it's that empowerment that I think has actually, in fact, made the boat faster.
So even as a Paracanoe champion, you've actually found that you need to work from home a little bit more as well, maybe.
Yeah, and I think it's a balance, isn't it? But it's about the fact that, I was brave enough, maybe, and bold enough to say, no, do you know what? I think I've learned that this session I can get done better at home if I'm not looking at everyone else and how well they're doing, and actually I get more out of it. So it was seeing that learning, seeing the result of that learning, but then it was taking the extra step and saying, this is what I want to do. There are quite a few examples within our squad of people just going straight back to how we've always done it. Yeah. And I'm not sure they're going to potentially see the gains. And the same is true in life. I think the winners is the wrong word, but the people that are going to come out of this horrendous pandemic experience better than anyone else are the ones that are going to take the learnings forward. And I think that's the secret. That's the key.
And as you've said, it is difficult often to say no, especially when something's always been a yes. Yeah. Andy, why do we find that difficult as people?
To say no?
Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be quite a few different variables for different people. It could be part of the culture in the organization or your family that you're in, your yes type culture. We have a lot of clients that say that, if you're in a high performance organization, or one where you never want to be seen to fail, or seen to be beyond capacity, or seen to not say yes, then there's huge kind of cultural pressure to be a yes person, a yes culture, that yes, I can take on more. I would never want to be seen that I couldn't achieve or do that. Then of course you've also got a slightly deeper DNA type programming, which is that we are actually programmed as a species to say yes or want to help or support somebody else of the same species. So if somebody is actually asking you for help or asking you for support, we are actually hardwired to say yes to those sorts of things. And so all factors being equal, we as humans would normally say yes rather than no, to a request, an offer, a thing. And now I appreciate not all things are always equal. But the other thing to mention for this on me, from my perspective as well, is that the knee-jerk reaction of yes is the problem. Yes isn't the problem, and no's not the problem. Of course, neither is the problem. It is the knee-jerk reaction that we can potentially have that I think is the core of this particular topic of performance. That actually, if your knee-jerk reaction is a yes, you are not giving yourself the space to focus on the important, to actually put time in for yourself, to have a work-life balance, to do whatever was required. And if your default is always no, then unsurprisingly, you will find yourself isolated from people and work and jobs and things, right? So in this area, it is about a conscious choice about saying, what is the benefit for me, my team, the business, or myself, or my performance, or the speed of the boat, or whatever the output is what is the output from my choice of what I input. And that comes down to what we said right at the start, that we as human beings have a finite amount of brain and body, energy and resource to put into our hours, days, weeks, months, and years. And therefore, whatever we can do to best control or choose the allocation of that, I think you are putting yourself on a more likely footing for high performance. Because of course, some of those choices are going to be wrong. We won't always make the right choice. But if we are consciously choosing, then we also have to take a conscious ownership of, well, that was the wrong choice, but I chose it. I didn't default to say yes. I didn't go, oh yes, I'll do that. Oh yes, we have to. Well, everyone else in the team is saying yes, so I'll say yes too. Type scenario. We have the ability to take personal ownership of our level of performance and level of input. And the other power of the word no for me as well is that you can use it as a check of whether you're going to say yes. And what I mean by that is saying, well, you just ask, well, what would happen if I said no? Like, would I be fired? Would my boss hate me? Or would it all be okay? Or actually, would I, well, I don't want to say no because I do want to do that thing. Actually asking yourself what would happen if I said no can even make your yes be more powerful if you choose to do it. Because I consciously know I don't want to say no to this, therefore I will say yes. And so it can be quite a powerful question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's about taking that moment, isn't it? It's about creating that moment of reflection to ask yourself exactly those questions, Andy. I think that's a brilliant tip and really powerful, really powerful.
Yeah, it comes back to control, doesn't it? Taking that conscious control of what you can do something about and directing your energy there. Before we wrap up, we've got a few more minutes left. I just want to pick up on the fact that we are basing all of these sessions on the A to Z of human performance, which of course, Emma, you co-wrote with Steve and Jonna. Tell us a little bit more about your role in the process of writing the book.
I'm not sure I played a huge part, but it was an incredible experience. So we decided, Jonna had the idea of writing a book, and then between the three of us, we kind of came together. And I'd had this idea about a year ago of an A to Z of performance, and we came together and had numerous chats over the first lockdown around ideas for chapters and all the rest of it. And then we got down to writing it, and it was amazing. Don't tell the boys this, but it was amazingly easy to just think how easily your thoughts then went down on paper once we got really diligent at the process of sitting down every week. And for me, it's the sharing of ideas from three different kind of angles, how similar they were, but also how slightly different and therefore applicable to different people. And I hope that's what we've created in the book is something where, a chapter by Steve might resonate with people more. A chapter by Jonna might resonate with a different type of person, and hopefully I've contributed a little bit towards that.
No, definitely, and it's definitely a wide range of topics as we've covered here: business, sport, life. It covers it all. It is available to pre-order now, and I'll drop the link in the chat if you want to go and pre-order that. And if you're listening on YouTube, I'll put it in the description below. But all that's left to say is thank you both for joining me. It's been a delight to have you both. And Emma, you'll be joining us tomorrow, is that right?
Yes, I'll see you tomorrow.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
So Emma's back
Andy.
tomorrow.
Emma, great to see you. Thanks so much for being here. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for joining, everyone.
See you very soon.
You're listening to the A to Z of Human Performance live show weekdays at 13:30 GMT with Chris Lissaman and resident expert Jonna Sercombe. Please enjoy responsibly.